Welcome to Impact Farming, where we introduce you to the people and ideas that will have a massive impact on your farming operation. Brought to you by Farm Marketer. Sit down, start the engine, and let's roll with today's show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Impact Farming Show. We have David Derwin joining us. David, how are you?
I'm doing great, Tracy. It's been a while. It's been a few months, and I know when we were talking in summertime there about, well, let's do a fall marketing update, and here we are already, and a lot has happened in those last few months. So it's exciting times as always.
I know. I can't believe we're here, but I am excited to be chatting, and I'm really excited to hear what you are going to say. So if you guys haven't caught David before, he is a commodity portfolio manager with PI Financial. David, do you want to tell our audience a little bit more about who you are, what you do, and how you work with farmers?
Yeah, absolutely. And starting bigger picture there, you mentioned PI Financial, and we are one of the largest independent investment and commodity futures advisors in Canada. And in fact, one of the few futures advisors in Canada, which is key because I find more and more that producers out there are wanting to learn about the tools that are out there, what they can do. And you got to start with some education and some understanding. And, there's not that much available out there. So we're happy to be able to work with farmers on that level. And when it comes to the farm clients that I work with, it's really a wide range of producers, mostly grain, but also livestock as well. And at the end of the day, we're really looking at incorporating complementary, risk management, revenue management, hedging strategies, marketing tools really into the mix. And whether that's to help them market their grain from canola, wheat, beans, corn, of course, canola, as well as even livestock producers, cattle and hogs to some extent. There's a need for that, but it's also bigger picture too. Looking at some of the inputs, gas prices, energy prices, diesel, and of course currency and even interest rates. So really, it's providing some complementary strategies to really fine tune, the marketing side of things and the financial side of the farm business.
And at a time like this, with everything going on, oh my goodness, I can't imagine there is a time that farmers have needed help, somebody to lean on in all these areas now more than ever, right? It's just, there's so much going on.
Yeah. And the last couple of years was a great example of that exact situation, Tracy, because we had the dryness last year and the drought that caused prices to go up dramatically. And then you had the Russian invasion that caused them to go up more. And since then, we've been seeing prices drift down lower and lower. And, and then there's fertilizer to think about. And I notice that there's, I think that's coming out more and more now, too, because I'm receiving more calls in. Perhaps some people are done with their harvest and they're starting to think about marketing. They got the grain in the bin and all of a sudden they see these really good prices. Prices were a little bit higher before. They could go lower. So it is a time where a lot of people are saying, I really need to fine tune some of the marketing and it's challenging. So let's look at all the tools out there. So yeah, you're right. Definitely.
Okay. Well, that leads right into my first question. The first thing I wanted to talk to you about, we spoke earlier in the year. Early summer, I think. And I wanted to check in with you. Were farmers able to take advantage far and wide from what you've been hearing of the high grain prices during April, May, June? What have you been working with farmers? What have you been hearing? Yeah.
And it's like that question, you never sell at the right price. You just sell too much or sell too little. And I think when we had those really high prices back in the springtime, which is typically a seasonally high time of the year for grain prices, going into it is very challenging because people were still very much gun shy based on what happened last year, pricing in a lot of grain at some nice high prices. And then prices went higher, and the drought we had caused some production issues, and there issues with buyouts. So that caused people to be a little bit more cautious this time around. So there was definitely some pricing that was done. In hindsight, of course, maybe not as much as they would like to have, but a lot of those physical sales were really added to with different option strategies, where the benefit, of course, is that you can protect the downside and get the downside in place that you need. You get all the upside if prices were to go higher. And probably most importantly, is that you're not committing any grain for delivery. You're not promising any production in that process. It's purely price protection. So there was a combination, I would say, where there's a lot of physical sales made, and that might have been 10, 20%. It depends. And then you could easily add to that another 10, 20% with options. So you were able to capture some high prices, but not necessarily everyone, right? Because a lot of people were concerned about production. And there was also the issue of prices are going to go higher. And no one knew for sure at the time. But the nice thing, again, with options is that you have that ability to be a little bit more flexible, get in place some protection, don't have to commit your grain, and still get the upside if it does in fact materialize. So there was some, but no one sells enough when the prices are really high, but there are reasons for that too.
Okay, so that was first question. We chat a little bit about how they did so. If you want to add on that a little bit more, go ahead. If not, I want to roll into the flip side of that. If not, why and what held farmers back from capturing those high prices?
Yeah. And so a lot of the strategies that were used to benefit from that scenario were in many cases, straightforward option strategies. Different put strategies are available to essentially get that downside in place, right? And reasons why people may not have done that, various reasons is one, they were just really concerned about production, really didn't want to do too much until they had a better sense. But two, a lot of it could just be the understanding, the exposure to it, the comfort and familiarity with options, and then most importantly, just having access to them, having a commodity account open where you could actually use those tools to hedge. So that would have been, that's typically the main reason why, right? Because people don't have the ability to do it. And then when prices are high, they want to do it. And sometimes it's, the old story, by the time you need an umbrella, it's a little bit too late. So it's getting prepared ahead of time. And it still is something that's fairly new to a lot of growers and how these options work. But I'm definitely seeing more and more people embrace that so they can have them in place for when these situations do arise. So that's sort of some of the reasons is they thought prices were going to go higher. They didn't have access to these tools, and they were just really concerned about doing anything as it related to marketing until they had a better sense of what was going in the ground, especially with delayed plantings here and dryness in southern Alberta, which all affects that decision-making process, and it makes it a little more stressful then too.
And you've been in that game, your game, longer than I have, but the volatility and then all the increases in the pricing, I can't imagine that farmers really wouldn't want to connect with somebody to bounce ideas, to learn,
Right.
to get that knowledge, right? How you look, and maybe I'm mistaken. I know farming's always been volatile, right, David? But
I've been doing this for 25 years, and the world's been coming to an end every year, it seems. So there's always something
good.
going on, definitely.
To me, it seems like every year it's getting worse. But
yeah.
To me, especially with all of the mix of things going on, it would be helpful to have somebody to chat with about that, right?
And that's a lot of the process too, is going through things. And even recently with really it's been the last couple of years we've seen interest rates going higher, but I've had a lot of conversations a couple of years back and last year about how to hedge interest rates and protect those, and a lot of strategies were put in place, maybe directly with their lenders to renegotiate loans and roll short-term loans into longer-term ones. But a lot of it is acting as that a strategic partner to go over things in terms of how does all these different financial aspects affect it. And you see more and more of it. And again, years like this, people who are now reaching out and saying, you know what, it really is time for me to understand how to use these tools and how to use them properly as well, I think is really important as well. So you need that, that partner in the process.
Love it. Okay, do you want to move to right now and talking about farmers, how much they've priced or protected, how much grain compared to what they typically would by this time of year? Do you want to go there right now?
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, conversations just this morning on those exact issues. And it depends a lot on the region, right? There are some areas where their growing conditions were a little bit, more on time and easier, and they had a better sense because things went into the ground at the right time and decent moisture. And then you had other areas who were like, flooded out or still drought conditions. So I've read a lot of reports on the fact that, yeah, certainly the amount of pricing that farmers have been doing is less than in previous years, and some of that too could be just because one, concerned about what their production was going to be, and that's an area that it makes it a little bit more tough, right? Because you're just not sure what you're going to have in place. But you could see 10%, which is low. Others who might be 50, 60%. But what has been sort of a steady approach over the last couple months, you're really since the springtime, as prices have been nice and high, and they've unfortunately drifted lower, but still at excellent levels. Like really, they're at good pricing. Is being able to augment what they've done on the pricing side with option strategy so that they can protect more of their production, but without having to really commit that much more of their grain. So if they were maybe at 10% of sales and they kind of wanted to cap it there, then you could easily add a couple of incremental option strategies where you might do another 20% a couple months ago and then maybe another 20% a month or two back, just to sort of continually have those incremental sale processes in place and trying to really get to the level of maybe 50, 60%. Some people have gone up to 75. And in some cases, if they've used a lot of options, they've been able to basically protect 100% of their production for this year just because they used a lot of options. So they've got the protection, but they're not having to worry about the delivery. Now that harvest is rolling and done in some places or kind of just beginning in others, those kind of numbers I think are important to keep in mind. Just what percentage are you priced? And if you're really surprised that your production is more than it might be, well, could be good reason to start looking even more proactively at some option strategies. So it varies all over the place, but regardless, those option strategies really do fill in that marketing gap.
Okay, excellent. So you just led me perfectly into my next question. So far this year, how's marketing been?
Well, there's a lot of sales done at some good prices, but as I mentioned at the beginning, right, you never sell at the wrong price. You just sell too much or too little. And obviously, in hindsight, farms will say, "Well, I should have sold more up there." But you got to remind them, look, but you didn't know what you were going to have in May and June, so you can't be too hard on yourself. But that's, again, it sounds like a bit of a broken record, but it's really just the fact that you've got the options that can let you be a little more comfortable in making some of those sales decisions. So I find more and more that kind of discussion is happening. It's like, okay, I should have done more. I didn't. So I might want to get some upside. So what's the balance here? How can we get the downside protected, but still have that upside?
Okay, excellent. So that spring, what we've been finding this year, where we're at right now, what are you thinking? What are your thoughts about next year, 2023 crop marketing?
Yeah, and with these high prices, that certainly does bring out those questions and those discussions. And already there's people that we've been looking at, and we've used either some future strategies to protect $800 canola for next year. And it's not going to be a large amounts, but this far out, it's sometimes more challenging to try and price that. So using futures does give you that ability to capture those prices now, and they're good prices. And you can also, for some of the larger, more liquid markets like corn and soybeans and even wheat to some extent, you can look at options going out to next year. And in fact, there's been a lot of conversations about how do we use those options for next year, are they even available? And some markets, yeah, like I say, the bigger ones, corn and wheat and soybeans, they are. Canola, not so much, but that doesn't mean there aren't options available, 3 months out, 6 months out, that type of thing, where if we start to see prices drop, you're still going to benefit from that protection. And even now, where clients do have a lot of hedge positions on, and maybe they start selling their grain and delivering, and they might not need as much protection, the question comes up, well, if the prices are still in a downtrend, then why don't we just look at keeping some of the existing hedges we have on in place, acting as sort of a proxy hedge for what's going to come out of the ground next year? Because in a downtrending market, you really can't have too much protection on and insurance on. So there are ways to look at it in sort of a bigger picture fashion. And I would say the one area that's come up a lot is as it relates to fertilizer. And we've seen that fertilizer prices are really, really high, and grain prices are high too. But I did some really interesting research just looking at what fertilizer prices have done over the last 30, 40 years compared to grain prices. And there are a couple of times when you see some very massive spikes where fertilizer prices just increase dramatically over what grain prices are doing. And one was back in 2008 when we had, the investment commodity boom, and a lot of money going into those markets. The one more recently, of course, was this past year with, basically the Russian invasion really caused the fertilizer prices to go up at a higher rate than grain prices. So you start to look at that, and now this time of year, people are looking at pricing in fertilizer. They should also really be looking at the marketing side of things. So that is a discussion that's been happening a lot, is saying, look, I've priced in a bunch of fertilizer. Let's look at ways we can hedge some of our grain for next year to at least try and lock in that profit margin. Because if they're locking in fertilizer, but then grain prices drop dramatically, well, you got your high inputs and you got your lower outputs. So there are ways to try and match that up. But yeah, the research I did was pretty interesting, and I'm open to sharing that with someone too if they want to reach out to me and access that, because it just, I know that they have a very good understanding of where fertilizer prices are at and their margins and where they want to be selling their grain. But just being reminded that you can match up some of your input costs with your revenues and hedge that, I think it goes a long way to being able to at least capture some of these prices for a portion of their production, given they're spending a lot of money on fertilizer.
Very great point. Okay, to wrap up, I want to do a bit of a two-part. We'll leave with final thoughts on grain market and where we're at, words of wisdom. And then I would like you to roll into how people can connect with you, work with you, and actually take action. I'm sure a lot of people listen to all these, still haven't got in touch, have got in touch. How can they take action? And that's where we'll end. Okay.
I have a very much an open door policy kind of thing where, can be made very accessible. Either reach out on, phone, email, send me a text, and I can provide that contact information. And I do see that now where we've got more and more people, reaching out. And, some final thoughts first. So you look at where grain prices are sitting at today, and we still do have some really good levels. Some of the markets like, say, canola, and we're at some very important price support levels, and everyone's going to have an opinion whether they're going to go back up or if they're going to continue dropping lower. But we are at an important price point with canola, $800 a ton on the futures, wheat sort of $9, $9.50 a bushel US, and corn and soybeans are still at some good levels. So I think some of the key things is now that a good portion of the grain is in the bin, maybe you have the time to spend a little bit more on the marketing. Start looking at that closely, because these are still good prices. And just because no one's going to be able to sell everything at the highs that we saw earlier in the year, there's still good prices, and there are ways to be able to capture that, but still get the upside. And I do see that more and more now coming into the fall. People are reaching out, and they've either, listened, received some of my research, and now at the point where they said, I've seen what you do. It makes sense. I really need to, sharpen up my own marketing and get more focused on it, and have that person who's also going to be there to remind you of things that need to be done, keep you on top of things, because let's face it, farmers wear a lot of different hats, and it can be challenging, right? And especially when you get busy out in the field. So I think that's always key, is marketing is very much a year-round exercise. You always got to keep it in mind, but let's face it, from a practical point of view, they get very busy doing certain things. But now that we're into the fall again, it's important, especially because we've got good prices, and that's important. So in terms of being able to reach out, probably the best way I always find is just picking up a phone and calling, and then we can, sort of go over things that are important to you. And for me, a toll-free number, 844-982-0011 is probably the best way. And again, that's 844-982-0011. And I like the conversation because it just, lets me understand right away what's on your mind, where are you at, what do you want to do, how can I help? And then, and then go from there. But at least that starts the process and starts the relationship.
Perfect. I think those are amazing words of wisdom, how producers can connect and take action. I believe we gave some contact details. I'll also put that in the show notes, all your details there. So if you're watching, listening, make sure to go to Farm Marketer, the Impact Farming tab, find the episode, and then all David's information and links will be on the show page.
Absolutely.
So David, here we are, fall update done, unless you have anything to add. Goodness.
Well, I'd be looking forward to doing a winter update, because who knows what prices will do between now and the next several months. But that's one thing. We started off the show, you were saying, death and taxes and passage of time are inevitable. And I would also say that market volatility is inevitable too. And it's going to go through, times when it gets more crazy and more chaotic, and times when it calms down. But that goes in cycles as well. So that's a certainty as well in the process. And just look forward to helping people use some of the marketing tools out there to tame that volatility a little bit.
Fantastic. David, it was wonderful talking to you as always. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tracy. And I appreciate all the listeners out there as well. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Perfect. My pleasure, David. And thank you for watching, tuning into another episode. And we will see you on next week's Impact Farming. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Impact Farming. For more great episodes and articles designed to help you manage and grow your farming operation, head on over to farmmarketer.com. Don't forget to sign up while you're there. We will see you on the next episode.